One of the most prevalent natural disasters in Nigeria is flooding. This environmental hazard has continued to claim the lives and property of many Nigerians. The early release of water from the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon has been identified as one of the contributing factors to flooding in the country. Data from the National Emergency Management Agency shows that the 2022 flooding arising from the release of water from the dam displaced no fewer than 1.4 million people, killed over 603 persons, and injured more than 2,400 others. Now, to cushion the effect of possible flooding from the Lagdo Dam, the Nigerian government agreed to build a shock absorber dam tagged Dasin Hausa Dam in Adamawa State. The proper control and management of flooding will not only save the lives and properties of Nigerians, but contribute to food security and the economic development of the country.
In recent days, the internet has been flooded with videos of flash floods, wreaking havoc in the coastal city following relentless rainfall over the past week.
Being pushed out of the road.
Many were temporarily displaced, property lost. In response to the crisis, officials from the Ministry of Environment conducted an inspection of the affected areas to assess the extent of work that needs to be done. During their visit to one of the affected areas, the residents were unhappy with the inspection team. They want the government to do more.
They do the canal is too small. When rain fall like this in our shop, we have raised our shop up, but the water is still coming inside.
People do come here at times in the night, come and throw bins. So we are not the one. At times we would stop them, but they wouldn't listen.
Similar concerns were voiced in Agege, where residents raised issues about canals flooding their homes after heavy rains. Then the team moved to Lagos Island. Here, residents say the water never runs dry. It was quite a sight. One of the drainage channels was filled with non-recyclable plastic, and other sections had poor drainage. After all these inspections, the government urged residents to cooperate with the state in fulfilling its duties, while assuring its commitment to meet the people's needs.
We won't just rest. We have to put their leg to fire to ensure they do the right thing at the right time and not delay the people.
All of us were ready to work together, the civil servants, the entire public service.
Long-term solution phase 2 is more of physical development, raising the infrastructure in Lagos Island, and that will take some time.
With projections that coastal cities like Lagos could disappear in the next century due to rising sea levels, it goes without saying that every meaningful action needs to be taken to keep the city afloat for generations to come. Esther Mapariola, TVC News, Lagos.
Joining us via Zoom is Director of Programs, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, Philip Jakpor. Philip, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I think I'm happy to be here again.
You think? Because we have this conversation every year and every time. And but this time around, I want to come from a different perspective. We often discuss, government inaction. But from the video that we just played, the people also have a major role to play. We saw the fact that drainages have been blocked. Measures put in place by government to addressing these issues have not been properly taken care of by the people. We saw refuse dump even in canals. Now, speak to us on the aspect of perhaps the people, the role the people play in addressing this issue of flooding before we come to the government.
Well, I think when I said I'm happy to be here, I'm happy to see your faces again, but not really happy that we are discussing the issue of flooding, which is something that is actually manageable. Now, the unusual rains, which is unusually heavy, is because of climate change. But managing floods is the responsibility of government and the people. When I say government and the people, I mean government has a role in terms of putting in place the policies to ensure that people don't build on floodplains, people don't obstruct water courses. Because in your report, I heard something about people complaining that the canals are filled with plastics and all those sort of things. But it is also the responsibility of government to sanction those who engage in these type of things. But that has not really been happening that much. What we see is that once in a while that happens, and then everybody goes back to their comfort zone. So I think what we need is exactly what government should be doing. It should be consistent. We should see structures on the floodplains removed well ahead of when these floods will happen, because these floods normally happen in the period between March and August, September, October. I think if that is done and there's adequate sensitization at the grassroots level, where a lot of people feel the brunt more, I think we will not be witnessing this type of things that we see every year. It's now a regular thing. We don't, and so when government talks that they are going to do this or do that, people don't even believe because it has been a recurring decimal. The rains are becoming increasing by the day. So it's evident that the climate change impacts are here with us. But what do we do to ensure that we are able to, take care of our people like what we see in other parts of the world? So these are the kind of things. Then if you do that and sensitize people, then let there be adequate sanctions for those who violate these laws. If you go to some places, you see Woroshoki and some other places, you see people building. In this case, it is proven government that people are blaming, because government is responsible for allocating lands where water should pass. You go to the Lekki axis, you see Lekki is a disaster, because whenever it rains, I'm sure when the cloud changes in Lekki, most places in Lekki, people are afraid because they cannot come out of their houses. There's water coming from the floor. The major express is just one road. So if there's a disaster in that axis, if the Atlantic, if the Atlantic decides to move in, I'm not sure anybody in that axis is going to escape it. So it's a matter of time. It's not about whether it will happen. It's just a matter of time when it will happen. So we have to take these things serious. That's just what I have to say.
Okay, so my concern is on Nigeria achieving the SDG goals. Now, because I've realized that 9 out of the 17 SDG goals are affected by flooding. They have to be done. They are directly affected by flooding in Nigeria. So how is perennial flooding affecting Nigeria's drive to attain the SDGs by 2030?
I think we just have to break it down to what the common person out there will understand. There are different goals. There's a goal on education. There's a goal on food. And so there are different goals. If we continue to have this kind of flooding, for instance, I'm giving an example to make it easy for those who may not understand what the SDG is all about. If there's flooding, most of our farmlands will be underwater. Children will not be able to go to school. Look at the connection. First of all, our farmlands will be underwater. Our people will be displaced. Our children will not be able to go to school. These are some of the goals of the SDG. The goal on education for all, the goal on food security for all. And when you now have flooding affecting these critical sectors, because like your report said, I think last year, about 4 trillion or so was lost in terms of land underwater. And the implication, of course, is there in terms of food security. For farmers, their livelihoods threatened. And for me and you who are not farmers, it's very, very expensive. And so a lot of people become vulnerable. Then, of course, that also impacts on health. It's where you cannot eat well, where you are displaced, you psychologically, you start feeling different things, and before you know it affects you mentally. So the ramifications are beyond just you see the flood. The ramifications cover a whole lot of things. In these communities where you have flooding, the children are not going to school. In a Legushi area of Lagos State, the Atlantic has nearly sacked the whole community. So if a child is in school in that community, the child cannot go out and come in. So it is as bad as that. So it has multiplier effect. That's why we feel that government has not been serious in terms of addressing this crisis. We've had the issue of the Lagdo Dam. Lagdo Dam, we have been talking about it for how many years? We have been talking about Lagdo Dam for many years. Lagdo Dam is in Cameroon. They will normally release waters because they feel for their people. They don't want their people to suffer the kinds of things that we are suffering here. So they have to release water so that the dam is not breached because of the heavy rains. And then you have a situation whereby Nigeria, which is supposed to build a buffer downstream, has refused to do it. We are not even, the Ministry of Water Resources is not even telling us what is the status of that dam. Because we have been complaining that dam, Nigeria was supposed to build a buffer dam since 1979. Is any government official telling us the status of the dam today? We are not hearing it. Recently, we heard the Minister of the Minister of Environment also say that they will make sure Nigerians do not suffer because of this flood. Here it is. It's happening now. Nigerians are suffering. Nobody is holding anybody to account.
But so the government is saying that they are going to build a shock absorber dam in Adamawa State.
They are going to build a shock absorber dam since 1979. This is embarrassing. By now, the dam should have been completed many, many years ago. If it has not been, we should be hearing about the status.
But is it too late now that they want to do this now?
It's coming a little too late. They should be apologizing to Nigerians for fooling us all these many years. Because for not building that dam many years, many lives have been lost. You mentioned it in your report.
Yeah.
Several people have died. In 2012, people died. I remember I was in Lokoja when the major flooding in 2012 happened.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people died. How are you going to account for those people? You just tell us you want to you now want to build the dam. So people should be held to account. If the dam was supposed to be built by 1979, who promised us that the dam was going to be built and did nothing about it? If monies were allocated, which people collected money, which companies collected money and refused to do anything? We should be holding people to account. It's because people are not held to account. That's why this anyhowness that we normally talk about.
That's why we have organizations like yours who are meant to also champion this cause of holding persons to account. Yes.
And that is what we have been doing. We have been advocating. We have been talking. They have closed their ears because it has not happened to their people. And some of them are disaster capitalists. They know that once these things happen, the next thing we'll be talking about palliatives for people in those areas. And that is another opportunity to steal. Are we not reading it in the papers? Are we not seeing it on TV? They allocate bags of rice and then each family gets 3 cups of rice and a small nylon of palm oil. So there are disaster capitalists who are benefiting from these things. And the sooner we are serious about this issue, the better for all of us. There's flood everywhere now. In Bayelsa, we learned communities are building sandbanks. If communities are building sandbanks, it's because the government has not done anything. It was the same Bayelsa last year that we had bodies floating, dead bodies floating, and competing for space in the waters with the living. Every state across the federation, all you hear the governors talking about is ecological funds for little things that they can manage. If there's a flood, and it's happening, if this flooding occurs yearly, how are you planning for your people? Are there emergency sites people can run to and then shelter there until these things passes? Because we know the period of year it happens. NIMET has been doing a good job. The Nigerian Geological Services Agency has been doing a good job in early warnings. But the states have been doing nothing. They want that ecological fund so that they can steal it, not to use it for anything.
Okay.
If not, building building shelters on high ground. What will it take? Did we not have it during the COVID?
Okay,
Those
so
shelters came up, emergency shelters came up during the COVID because nobody wanted to associate with anybody who had COVID. Why can't they do the same thing now?
okay,
So these are the questions we have to ask them.
Mr. Jakpor, now you mentioned a flood of 2012, which actually Nigeria lost about $16.9 billion US in that flood. But in all of these things now, what can we as a people do? Because we're in the rainy seasons already and floods are everywhere. What can we do as citizens to ensure that we do not get affected?
Well, I think we have to continue to do the kind of thing you are doing, which is, raising our voices. We must start going to those communities where these things are happening. Let the people start talking. So it goes beyond just me and yourself or anchoring this program. People in those communities must take their destinies in their hands. What is happening is to your tent to Israel. The government will do nothing. I don't believe in all those drama of going to communities and pretending as if anything is happening. These things are real, things that you can see. I continue to talk about it. I was there in Lokoja in 2012 when a government official came with bags of rice and gari to give those people in one of those displaced persons camps. And after all the glitz, media razzmatazz, he wanted to live with those same things. People are benefiting from these things. That's why they are not doing anything about it. And then, like I said the last time, and I repeat it again, this issue of flooding, especially when it comes to the Lagdo Dam, is a security issue, and the security agencies are not doing anything about it. Because if there's a crisis between Nigeria and Cameroon, they will just open the water and all Nigeria will be underwater. So what are we? Are we not thinking? It's a security issue. If you have all your military equipment and then the flood from the dam overwhelms it, can you do anything? Is that not what happened in Ukraine? The Russians and the Ukrainians, the ongoing war. When Russia knew that a particular point, I think in Bakhmut, the Ukrainians might make headway there, all they needed to do was to destroy 2 dams. That's what is there in the report. And then the Ukrainians could not move in that direction. So it's a security issue, and our security agencies are not thinking proactively. We don't have to wait for these things to happen.
Perhaps they are not seeing it as such, maybe because they are not well enlightened.
They are not doing their jobs. Let them think. You think like the disaster capitalists. This is an opportunity to stop those things so that we are secure as a nation. Why is it that every year we must wait for this Cameroon to announce that they want to release water from the Lagdo Dam, and then we start running helter-skelter? We cannot plan. What is the status of the Dasin Hausa Dam? Let's ask the Minister of Water Resources. Let them tell us. With this drama of we are doing something about it, we know you have been doing something about it. What is the status? The Minister of Water Resources should come and tell us what is happening with the Dasin Hausa Dam, the status. That is what we should be hearing. Let's not start holding people to account. The Minister of Environment said last month that they will make sure Nigerians don't suffer. What has he done about it? Let's ask him. So these are the kind of things we do. Hold these people to account, or else it's just talk and no work. That's what's happening. And for this talk and no work, Nigerians are suffering. Nigerians are dying. It will affect food prices because those are the places where you have this flooding today. That is where the food belt. So when food prices start going up and we start shouting, there's a reason. These are all these things are all things that converge and then inflict pain on the ordinary people. So these are things we must do something about.
This matter of accountability, I believe it should begin from the state governors, how they are handling some of these issues. Perhaps since they are closer to the people as against the federal government, the people can begin to ask them questions, hold them to account. And now that the government is saying there is the Dasin Hausa Dam, a shock absorber dam, we should begin to have a collective voice that is speaking to understand how far the government has come and where we are going with that dam. Don't you think?
Well, it's all encompassive, like I've just mentioned. The Lagdo Dam is a federal thing, which affects all of us. State level response. The NEMA is supposed to anchor that, and then with their state counterparts, SEMA. Is there synergy? Like I always say, NEMA will say they are doing something, but every year they are doing something. We don't see the synergy with the states. We don't hear, for instance, that this year they have choppers to fly to communities that are inaccessible and pick people who may be on their roofs. We don't hear the state level, their state level counterparts in the SEMA saying similar things. The most prominent thing we hear is the state governors talking about emergency ecological funds. So everybody is just talking about money that they can lay their hands on and do nothing, because this issue has been there since it came to light in 2012, when about 21 states were underwater. We all saw it. But now people like you and I and the people who are on the front lines of this crisis must now take our destinies in our hands, because ultimately when it happens, it's only the living that can talk. Those who have been submerged, those who have died, they've gone to their maker for judgment. So it has nothing to do with them anymore. But the living will bear the brunt, because the people who die, some of them are relatives and friends. So it has effect even on our own society and on the economy, the dislocation. You talked of the SDGs. So we have been able to connect, this flood to inability to meet our target of ensuring that our people have access to good food. It affects the right of the child to school. It affects the health. So these are all ramifications. It goes, it's endless. In those communities where you have these floods, their wells where they get water is now polluted. So the waters they are going to be using for drinking are going to be poisoning water. So you are going to have a lot of health issues. You are going to have a lot of mental health issues also. These things are things that sane societies will take serious. The flooding we know is happening everywhere in the world, but then we see the actions they take in those kind of places. Look at what happened in Egypt with the sea incursion and the thousands of people that died. They've started working on it. They are doing something. You see the way they swung into action. As we have not had that level of disaster, we pray we don't have that level of disaster. If we do, it's going to be chaos, confusion. It's going to be Armageddon. Because if we cannot manage these little ones, once it rains and everywhere is flooded, give it some 1 hour, 2 hours, you see the water, finding its level. That means all we need to do is to have proper drains. All we need to do is to open the drains. All we need to do is also to transit from this system of dependence on products from the fossil fuel, which is plastics everywhere. The companies that won't produce these things, we have to start holding them to account, because there are plastics that are littering everywhere, creating the next level of crisis. Because by the time you dig, these canals, 90% of what you get out of there is plastics. This is from the fossil fuel industry. The companies producing these things, what role are they playing? Because their products are part of the problem. So we have to start thinking the way they think in other parts of the world. In some places, they don't use plastics anymore for packing things. They use paper bag, which is biodegradable. Are we doing those kind of things? So there's a lot that it's a holistic thing. Governments that think are moving in that direction. We are still here, talking of flood. These governments are moving ahead, taking concrete decisions. So it's very unfortunate that we have to be saying this thing over and over again, and becoming like John the Baptist in the wilderness speaking and nobody's listening. Something has to be. That's just what I'm saying here.
Okay, so if you are to suggest sanctions now to give, because a lot of these companies are in states, what would you think would be appropriate sanctions? Because I've heard in the past where they advocate and encourage these companies and people to take advantage of multi-use plastics or single-use plastics, or I don't know how they call it. But what would be your own? What will you encourage them to do? What will you say what kind of sanctions should the government put in place to ensure that these companies adhere to the directives?
Well, in other parts of the world, the the government actually gives them incentives to move away from, these products that harm our environment. So it's either you are giving them incentives or you are fining them. It could also be, you could also start, I think an organization is doing that in Benin now, where they were going around to look at the kind of plastics that litter the environment, that block the canal, and then they want to name and shame the companies behind most of those products. Those are the kind of things. So that let these companies tell us the policies they are putting in place to actually key into the vision of renewable energy, moving to products that are, environment friendly. These are things that it's at this governmental level. The government knows what to do in this regard. It goes beyond us recommending. But these are naming and shaming them is one of them. Putting incentives in place for them to transit is another.
How far will naming and shaming them go?
Oh, most companies don't want their names to be in red. So when this year you mention one company and say they are the highest polluter in terms of plastics in the environment, the other year you also name them, they will try to do something different. They want to leave that. They are very conscious of their public image. So there are many things that, like I said, you can sanction them, you can give them incentives to transit, and if they don't, you sanction them. And then for those who do well in that regard, you also celebrate them. So there are many things that can be done. Like I said, no company wants to be, in they are named in the public as the highest polluters. No company wants this. They want to make sure their records are spick and span.
All right, quickly before we let you go, Philip, is the matter of sensitization. As it is, it seems a lot of Nigerians do not still understand what climate change is about. Is this something we now need to begin to bring to our classrooms?
I think this is a very, very important suggestion. You have even suggested it. I think that is very, very important. We have to look at our curriculum. Our curriculum has to inculcate, climate change, environmental sustainability from the primary level. From the primary level. Our curriculum does not have it. So the Ministry of Education has something to do in that regard. The Ministry of Education should start inculcating climate change into the curriculum so kids can know that, look, this is what is happening and this is the way the little things they do or do not do contribute to the crisis we are having now. So I completely agree with you. That's something some of us have also been advocating for long. Our curriculum is still, we have to move with the tide. Things have changed.
All right. And that's a fine place to leave the conversation. Philip Jakpor, Director of Programs, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation, Africa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Right.